Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. As you probably all know, ChatGPT 5 has come out. There are multiple versions of it. In fact, actually, let me reduce this a little bit. So you can see in the new interface, there's GPT-5. There's actually not a lot of choices anymore. There's other models. There's Thinking and Pro since I have the Pro tier. So I have tested out the basic model, which adjusts its thinking capabilities, and the Pro model. I have thoughts about that. I've had to come up with a whole bunch of new tests at this point because it seems rather quaint, the things that I was doing just a few months ago in terms of giving these things logic puzzles and math puzzles and things like that. They're obviously capable of solving those. So I've come up with a bunch of new questions, kind of, like usability questions, things that will make my life a better life. And with that in mind, I have done a lot of the work ahead of time because it just takes forever for it to interact with this, especially the Pro mode, very, very slow. But I will give you my thoughts about all of this at the end, and some of these things I haven't seen the output for yet, so it will be interesting to see. So Sam Altman touted that GPT-5 is a better writer than GPT-4. Personally, I use O3 almost always. That is my go-to model that I use in terms of ChatGPT. So just rather interesting that 4 is the comparison for this. But anyway, I wanted to ask it a writing question. So I asked both the base model, in other words, this regular model that's the default, and also the Pro model that thinks for a really, really long time, to write me a 25-chapter full-length science fiction novel outline. Obviously, don't want it to write the whole thing at this point. So weirdly enough, they both came up. I gave it free rein in terms of what it wanted to write about just in the science fiction genre. It came up with interstellar travel and first contact with an alien species. Both of them came up with that. So don't know if that's just random luck or if that's something to do with the way these models think, and they're similar in their training and everything. But anyway, I actually personally prefer this version, I think, The Light of Other Minds. So you can see we've got a basic setting, we've got the main characters, we have an outline. I'll try to scroll through this relatively slowly. I'm not going to go through it, obviously, but if you want to pause and look at what the outline of each chapter is, you can look at this. Anyway, so we have this thing is all about dialogue. It's all about interstellar travel using the Alcubierre warp drive and things. So it's based in some hard science facts and things, or at least some theories about that. Got fault lines, got breaking points. So I mean, it's divided this up and it's done 25 chapters exactly like it said. It's got a bunch of themes, and then it can expand this into a beat by beat thing. So let's look at the Pro version. The Pro version thought about this for a long time. 3 minutes and 27 seconds. So the regular version just popped out an answer instantly. So this thought for 3.5 minutes about this, and then came up with this answer. Parallax Winter, which is also about first contact at the edge of ethics, and it uses pellet beam starships to Bernard Star as opposed to Alcubierre warp drive, so a little bit different, probably a little bit more grounded in science reality, since the Alcubierre drive is unlikely to actually work in reality since it requires negative mass. This could actually work, but of course would take a much, much longer time. Anyway, you've got a cast, you've got the tech tree assumptions, things like that. You've got part 1, Invitation to Winter, part 2, Transit, so it's getting there. Part 3, Arrival. The idea here is that they discover a life form that's not kind of human and it kind of figures out what to do. The ethical discussion is, what do these humans do? Do they stay? Do they try to caretake this, or do they destroy it, or do they just leave? Things like that. So then stewardship, so you can see what the answer is by that stewardship. And we get Parallax Winter as the last chapter, which is a cool title, I gotta say. And then there's an emotional through line and recurring ethical questions. Anyway, I think I like the non-pro version better in terms of its ideas, but one thing I'm going to do while I test out some other things is I'm going to ask both of them to write me a prologue, a real, page turner prologue for this novel. So I'll copy this and put it in both, a page turner prologue to this novel, write me something that'll make the reader super interested in the plot and want to read more. So I'll do that, and then I'll go back to my other version and I will write the same thing, same prompt. And you can see probably that this one, yep, here we go. So instantaneously with GPT-5, it actually goes ahead and writes that. With the Pro version, it's reasoning, it's thinking. You can see that it's got details about its thinking. So this is what goes on. It thinks about this excessively for normal use. So I guess the TLDR for all of this is that I think that I will probably use the regular version much more than the Pro version. I will only use the Pro version in cases where I feel like I really need it. The regular version seems to adjust its thinking. I see where it says sometimes it's like, I'll think about this longer, and it actually spends more time thinking about it. But the base version will answer much more quickly, and under normal circumstances, I don't really want it to think a long time. I just want an answer relatively quickly to something that's probably relatively easy. So so the sample was supposed to be dead rock, scraped out, and it was changing. The first time she'd looked, it had been simple hexagon. Now it's a fractal flower. Okay. And obviously this is kind of in medias res. It's starting on the planet, so that's kind of cool. So then Dr. Rao, June Park's voice was tense, trembling. I think you should come to the lab. Iris is talking to it, right? So there we go. So we have something that's brief, but also kind of like, oh, cool, what's about to happen with this? Looking back at the Pro version, I'm not sure. Okay, so not sure. It seemed like it got stalled out there. So I'm going to go ahead and fire it back up again. Like you can see, it thinks for a very long time about something that should be relatively straightforward. Okay, let's look at something else. I asked it to create for me a Newton versus general relativity simulator. I had to go back and forth with this quite a bit and actually turn from GPT-5 Pro to GPT-5 to do some finishing touches. So this took a little bit of effort and it's still not perfect, but it's pretty cool. So let me go ahead and shrink this down just a little bit so you can see it. You can see that it's got a lot of details. And it actually is using, I'm going to butcher this pronunciation here, the Pazinski Vita GR-like simulator. So I told it I wanted to be able to do it in kind of real time, right? So I didn't want it to think so much about the actual general relativity, which takes a lot of number crunching to calculate, that it couldn't play this back in real time. So you can see, I'll restart this. Anyway, you can see that the blue is Newtonian and the yellow, gold, whatever color is general relativity. You can see how with something that's 87 times the mass of the sun, lots and lots of controls here. There's a tail here, how they actually function very differently. The general relativity one will eventually come back and form an ellipse, whereas the, the Newtonian one will come back and form an ellipse, while the GR one is just going off and doing its thing. If we turn up the, you can see immediately that the general relativity one ends up inside the Schwarzschild radius. And interestingly enough, what I asked it to do as one of the last tweaks, see how it's the Newtonian one is just a nice ellipse, is I told it to create a kind of a simulation of the stretching of space-time. The metric tensor here, I asked it to create a representation of that. So that's the bending of the graph. The Euclidean graph is the Newtonian one because that's not being affected by gravity, of course. And then the one that's distorted is the one that is the general relativity one. I can also zoom in or out. So I can zoom out a ways here. I can increase the mass of our sun a lot. This is the part that's kind of goofy right now, is that, if I click here, notice, I don't know why. This is the part I was not able to solve, but it starts it over there as opposed to where I click. But anyway, we're zoomed pretty far out here, so you can see that they're moving relatively slowly. Hopefully we'll see a separation. So you're already starting to see a separation of the general relativity version versus the Newtonian one. And as we get to more distorted space-time, we should see more differentiation between the two. I've done this a bunch of times. It's hard not to get it to go inside the Schwarzschild radius when the mass is large enough. But what you do see if it doesn't is that the general relativity one will precess. So in other words, the orbits never align with each other. They don't form a perfect oval. They rotate like this, which is very cool because that was one of the original predictions of general relativity, is it explained why Mercury's orbit precessed around instead of being a perfect oval. So anyway, so I think we're zoomed out a little bit too far to see all of this stuff. So I'm gonna zoom in a little bit here and we're going to restart, and I think I'm too far out. So yeah, I'll go ahead and create something. Whoops. There we go. We can see it over here. It was hidden underneath me for a second. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and pause this and create a new one that's a little bit closer so we can see it. There we go. And you notice that as I drag it, it creates a velocity vector, so it goes further away. Let me go ahead and pause that again. You have to be paused to be able to do this. I'm going to create a smaller velocity vector so we can just play this quickly. There we go. So now it's moving less. So probably the gold one is going to end up inside the Schwarzschild radius. Yep, there we go. And the Newtonian one will go around. So anyway, you can play around with this. If I change the mass of the object of the central orbiting or the central sun object down to 315 solar masses, we're going to get it probably won't fall inside the Schwarzschild radius. One thing I haven't done at this point is I would probably like to be able to type in a number because it's like it's just too coarse. I can't set it, right? If I go from 315, I want to increase it by a little bit. It's like 372 is the next value that I can get to. So anyway, it's not perfect, but it's pretty darn cool and it appears to be working properly. So I find that very interesting. There we go. Okay. So now you can see how it will precess around. So it's not closing back up again and creating a complete orbit. It's creating a precessing orbit. So pretty darn interesting stuff. All right, and after 3 minutes and 3 seconds from the pro version, we got a much, much longer prologue. Wow. The first time the planet speaks, it does it with primes and a storm. Wow. Okay. That's much better than a dark and stormy night, although it does have storms in it. Very interesting. Kestrel is the AI, by the way, so really interesting. Signal is not thermal. Okay, I mean, I've got to say at least the length of it, and obviously I'm going to have to spend time actually reading it, but this looks like it is significantly more detailed and significantly more interesting prologue in terms of writing for a long period of time and thinking about it. So I don't think we're very far away at all from the first AI created novel. I know there are ones out there already, but I mean like a good one where people are like, oh, I actually think that this is worth reading. So, I mean, maybe this is the beginning of that right now. Pretty interesting. Voice breaking and steady. Give me 6. Maya turns the sail a fraction. Outside, the invisible river keeps battering the field. And for 6 very long minutes, a small crew in a very old habitat holds their breath while the world waits under ice. Interesting. Okay. I mean, that's a page turner, right? I'd continue on, and I assume we're going to go back in time. And, you know, we generally starting in medias res for a novel is a good idea. It's a, you know, good way to like make people pay attention. One of the best prologues ever is in The Song of Fire and Ice by George R.R. Martin, the original novel Game of Thrones. The prologue is fantastic, and it's one of those prologues that doesn't have a payoff for a really, really long time. You go through a couple of novels before there's a payoff to the prologue. But anyway, that's a really good prologue example, and this looks like we've got that kind of thing. So I've got to say that the pro version, even though it thought about it a lot longer, it looks like this is a substantially better prologue. All right, next up, I asked the pro version to create a basic n-body gravitational simulator of 2 galaxies colliding with dark matter and a bunch of other stuff. I have not looked at this at this point. It'll be very interesting. I've copied the code over to VS Code, and then you can see it's pretty long. It's, how long is it? 832 lines long. So we're going to go ahead and hit run, and we are going to see if we actually get anything. Okay, configuration, viz, dim density. And let me move this over, and I don't know if it's actually playing. Yep. Okay. So we're actually seeing it play. I don't know if it's doing anything. So we've got stars that are in blue and dark matter, the halo of dark matter around it. I asked it for controls. Oh, maybe the controls are here. Let's see. I don't see the, oh, wait, okay, there's the controls. All right, sorry, it's popping it up over on the other window. So click on slider to adjust, bottom, right, top, W space, H space. Okay. I don't know that any of that actually matters to the simulation itself, but interesting. So yeah, I really can't tell if it's doing anything at this point. So maybe, I mean, there is a time thing that's going on, but I'm not seeing, let's see, I don't know what any of these, I think maybe this is just because it's maybe, is it in PyPlot or something? I didn't even look at it, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on. But yeah, it seems to just be operating. I'm going to go ahead and just kind of set it aside and see if we get something obviously different from this over a period of time. And yeah, we'll just move that out of the way. So it does seem to be operating. I mean, there's time is 1.0. I just don't know what that actually means. So next up, I asked it to do a wind tunnel fluid flow cross section of a wing. And I said either 3D or 2D, but I wanted it to be able to run in real time. So it did a 2D version of it, obviously, using a D2Q9 Lattice-Boltzmann method. Cool. Tuned for near real-time performance on a laptop and designed for classroom demos. So awesome. Let's see how that works. Let's go over here to our wind tunnel demo. I don't know if this will try to take the place of the other Python thing or something, but let's take a look. So, okay, so I took a couple of screen grabs because I can't let it run forever because apparently I can't run both of these Python things at once. So whoops. But anyway, here's time equals 1.94 and time equals 3.88. There are some very subtle differences here, but obviously this thing is going to require some tweaking because I want it to be able to run faster and be a little more obvious what's going on. So anyway, you can, if you look at it carefully, sorry, the two things are a little bit different size, so it's not doing a perfect comparison, but you can see that there are slight shifts in the central stars in this area between the two of them. So a little bit more distance, a little bit less distance, a little bit of movement. So anyway, it does appear to be working, although it's very slow. What I would do next, or what I probably will do next, is ask it to record a movie of this so that it takes like one picture every frame so I can put it together after the fact. All right, so running this, I'm getting a bunch of overflow values and things. I'm not sure if it's actually going to start. Python is thinking about it. Yikes, there is a lot of stuff going on here, which doesn't seem to be working super fantastically, and it doesn't seem to be starting, so I may have to feed this back in again and have it think about it some more. All right, so I put in a request for the Galaxy Simulator and for this to be updated. I'm going to do one more thing in the meantime, which is I had asked it a question about longevity. Here we go, all the way back up at the top. I'm 60. I want to live an arbitrarily long life. Please research the best methods for me to extend my life and health span such that I have the best chance to make it to the longevity escape velocity curve of lifespan. In other words, where life is basically extended more than 1 year for every year that you live. So, all right. So Sam Altman talked about sycophancy in a recent interview that he did, a very good interview. Anyway, love the goal. So a little bit of sycophancy, but you know, I guess that's not a bad thing. So here we go, is to 1, drive today's biggest mortality risks as low as possible. That seems like a reasonable idea. 2, build and maintain a large functional reserve muscle, VO2 max, cognitive and metabolic health. And 3, keep your options open for future therapies by staying alive and robust long enough to benefit from them. Okay. I mean, those are general ideas. The devil is in the details, of course. So this says it's a research-backed roadmap tailored to a healthy, ambitious 60-year-old. I've labeled the highest leverage items and included clear targets plus evidence. So I'm going to read this through, obviously, in more detail later and see what I can change around things, right? So what actually moves the needle? So this is the summary, so this will be the big thing. Kill cardiovascular risk. Yeah, okay. I have high blood pressure, so that's an immediate thing I have to worry about. I do control that with some medication. Not super happy to be taking meds about it, but, you know, such is life. Anyway, so yeah. So that's the number one thing, and so I'm working on that, so that's actually good. Drive at aterogenic lipoproteins low. There we go. I think LDL as your... Use LDL-C as your sales guideline-driven statin first. Consider add-ons if needed. Use CAC scoring. So I do have calcium buildup in my arteries, unfortunately, so that's a bummer, even though my cholesterol scores are very low. So that is obviously another thing. If you have an overweight, obesity is a problem with established blah, blah, blah. Semaglutide, weekly reduced MAC. So I'm pretty good on that front. So I think I'm okay. Keep a high VO2 max and strong muscle. That's really, really interesting. That's the highest leverage. Eat for cardiometabolic health and longevity, high leverage. So these are interesting ideas. Vaccines and cancer screening, high leverage. So that's actually good. So make sure you take the proper vaccines, do cancer screening, and then don't smoke. And for alcohol, the WHO position is clear. There's no safe level. Bummer. I do like a little bit of whiskey once in a while, so what can I say? But anyway, so yeah, so these seem pretty reasonable. And then, of course, getting into precise targets and stuff. So this seems like a pretty reasonable result to be getting. It thought about this for 10.5 minutes. So it really thought about that for a long time. Speaking of that, let's go back and see. The Galaxy Simulator is still cranking away. The wind tunnel one is still cranking away. So you can see that when you use GPT-5 Pro, you need to be in it for the long haul. So anyway, I'll come back to this in a minute when we actually get some details and maybe get an update. I feel like the Galaxy Simulator is okay. We could see that there was something going on. It was just very, very slow and subtle, and the controls were missing, but the basic idea appears to be there. The wind tunnel, unfortunately, as it created all of these weird multiply problems and things like that. So that one is the one that I would like to see at least get something out of it and see what it looks like. One quick thing I want to point out over here is look at that. There's a subtle hint of you can actually see through the control panel. I didn't want to move it out of the way because it was doing that, but anyway, that's pretty darn cool that you can actually see through the control panel. Anyway, that's just a quick little note as I was waiting for these other things to finish their thinking. Alrighty, it looks like we actually have something that is sort of functional. Let's see, wind tunnel. Looks like we've got, oh wow. Yeah, so we've got actual airflow coming over this. Start, pause, reset, toggle streamlines, resolution low, medium, high. Let's just go with low to get it running a little faster at this point. Wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, this looks like a very, very significantly good. The one weird thing is that it looks like the wing is actually upside down. So let's do a flat wing and see what that looks like. There we go, with a flat wing. So you can see that it's actually doing this generation of, that's weird. So the flat wing is the resolution is pretty, oh, let's see if we go to high resolution. Maybe that will help. Reset. Yeah, okay. So the high resolution actually helps the wing shape and things. So I'll go back to medium here. We'll reset. It looks like it doesn't do it interactively. But so we've got that. We've got a NACA 2412, a NACA 0012. So let's see, reset. Yep, that's weird that it's upside down though. But okay, so this one's right side up. Maybe that NACA 2412 is an upside down wing. So let's go ahead and let it think about this for a while. So you can see vorticity here, which is the amount of like swirls that you would get. And obviously your angle of attack, the angle of attack down here is so in degrees. So it's set to 5 degrees currently. And you can see that we're getting, I think, relatively laminar airflow over that. I assume that's why it's white. Let's go ahead and turn the angle of attack way up to like 13 or 14 degrees, reset. And now what we should see is significantly more blue and more dark red here, because it should actually create some vorticity as we go. But we will see what happens. So pause for a second here. All right, so it looks like we've got pretty heavy interactions here now that it's actually working, and we're getting a lot of vorticity in the negative 0.2 range at the front, and it looks like we're seeing some definite, disconnection. The mass of air is no longer on the wing, which would be a stall condition here. So it's created something that looks like it's actually working properly, a lot of vorticity and a disconnection of the airflow over the wing. So pretty cool. I mean, I think given the fact that I just basically had to tell it that there was an error and it figured it out, this appears to be a pretty sophisticated and accurate fluid flow simulation of a wing cross-section. Very cool. All right, and finally, we'll look back at this Galaxy simulator here. So the physics dominates the runtime. Obviously it does. So it gave me a new version. I'm going to give it a try and see if it works. Okay, we got something, and looks like time 1.6. I don't know if it's actually saved this or not, whether it will do this automatically. Help space. Okay, gosh, it's very, very small. So anyway, it looks like you use the keyboard commands rather than interactive like GUI commands to do this. But it is it's operating. The time steps appear to be slightly smaller than they were before. If this actually works and saves out individual images, I will create a video of the simulation, because that would be really cool, and I'll overlay it over my talk here. Anyway, what do I think about all of this? I think the GPT-5 has obvious advantages over GPT-4 and O3 and previous models. It looks like it probably has some advantages over Grok and other frontier models from other companies. As far as usability, the regular version of it appears to be the most usable, because it's not requiring a ridiculous amount of time to think about everything, and it seems to adjust its thinking scale based on what it needs. So on a daily basis, GPT-5 would be the one I would use. But in terms of writing, the Pro version seems to have a definite leg up on the regular version in terms of writing better quality stuff. Again, at just a very, very quick glance, I would have to read it over to really get a sense of whether it was working or not. So overall, is GPT-5 a step change in the quality of these? I don't think so. It seems like it's an evolutionary change, not a revolutionary change. It's better in a lot of areas, but I'm not sitting here going like, wow, I'm completely blown away. I've never seen anything that looked like this before. So in terms of the hype, does it deserve all of the hype? Halfway yes, halfway no. I'm sure it took a ton to train this, and it's a pretty ridiculously complex model, but at the same time, it's not something that I feel like has made as big of a change as something like GPT-3 to 4 did. That was a pretty big step change. You really notice that. With this, it feels a little bit more iterative. Now, will we see a GPT-05 that's kind of a reasoning or better model put on top of this with more work? Yeah, almost definitely. Will we see the GPT-5 base model get faster and smarter? Yes, we will. So all of this stuff will get better over time. But while I'm very impressed with what they've done, I'm not completely blown away. I guess that's the TLDR of this entire thing. But on the other hand, the bar has been raised and raised and raised. Here I am doing stuff that I never even would have imagined a GPT could do even 1 year ago, much less 2 years ago. So it's pretty amazing. Maybe it's just the bar has been raised so much that I'm just like, oh yeah, no big deal. It can do stuff that I couldn't have imagined it could have done 18 months ago. And that could be part of what's going on here, is I'm just getting used to it. But with the hype involved around GPT-5, I was hoping it would be just a little bit more mind-blowing, and I would be like, wow, this thing is incredible. So those are my tests, my thoughts. Let me know in the comments what you would like tested. And of course, if you've done tests, let me know what worked, what didn't work, did anything blow your mind, all of that kind of stuff. While you're down there, if you don't mind liking the video, it helps out with YouTube's very primitive massive algorithm that determines who gets to see these videos. And if you want to see more of this kind of stuff, please do consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.